We are going to get started as Michael lets in the last couple of people. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Bernil. I'm Director of External Relations and Engagement for the Fraser River Discovery Centre. I want to welcome you to our second virtual Fraser River Dialogue of the year. And the topic, as you all know, is celebrating birds of the Fraser Basin. And we're doing it as part of this year's Vancouver Bird Celebration. Before starting, I want to acknowledge we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. Territorial acknowledgement is one small part of reconciliation, and I'd ask you to please take a moment to think of other ways that you can participate in reconciliation with Indigenous communities. Now a bit more on today's dialogue and an introduction of our panelists and a quick review of how you can participate in Zoom today. So tonight is about birds, and it's obviously a popular topic, and our presenters must be popular presenters because we had over 200 people register for this evening, and that is probably 4 to 5 times the number of any event we've ever done virtually. So a very popular topic, and as I mentioned, very popular presenters. And the first of those panelists I want to talk about is Dr. Rob Butler, who many of you know of and have probably heard speak before. Rob is an ornithologist. He's an author. He's a filmmaker. He's an artist. He's a great friend of the Fraser River Discovery Centre, and as I mentioned, a very popular speaker. Some of you may have been with Rob when we did our Walk with Crows a couple of years ago event, which was absolutely stunning, and may have attended the premiere of his film Returning, which we did at the Anvil Centre. So Rob's here today to talk about birds, obviously, but he will be sharing some photos and information from his new book. It's called Pacific Flyway: Water Bird Migration from the Arctic to Terra del Fuego. And he'll also be taking any and all questions about birds in your neighborhood. And quick, recognition to Rob as well, as we just found out that the book has won an award. So we'll get Rob to talk a bit about that. Joining Rob on the panel is Alyx Coulter from Stanley Park Ecological Society. Alyx, this is the first time she's worked with us, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Alyx will be talking about this year's Vancouver Bird Celebration, which used to be called Vancouver Bird Week, and she's going to talk a little bit about the name change, as well as how to identify celebrities, I guess, in your neighborhood, and how to make this an annual event for your neighborhood. Okay, in terms of format, we're going to keep it pretty flexible tonight. Our experience with Rob is that whenever he's a presenter or a speaker, there are lots of questions. And so we want to make sure we leave time for all of you to be able to ask questions. To start, we're going to give Rob a chance to talk about his book and share some stories and pictures. And then we're going to ask Alyx to talk about the Vancouver Bird Celebration and some of the events that are going on, as well as I mentioned, why we had the name change. And once that's done, then we really are going to turn it over to you, for you to ask questions of Rob and of Alyx. And that will include, by the way, if you have interesting pictures of birds that you've seen, whether it's in your backyard or in your neighborhood, you can put them in the chat. And we came on early and we experimented with this, and we're gonna screen share them in the chat and maybe get Rob or Alyx to talk about them. Okay, in terms of how we're going to deal with questions, because there are so many people on this, there are well over 100. Normally we would do hands up and chat. We're just going to do chat questions tonight. So I will be monitoring the chat. Michael, who was the first person you saw tonight, Michael Goodchild works with the Fraser River Discovery Centre as well. He's also going to be monitoring the chat. And so we will look for those questions and those pictures, and then we will ask them the questions and share the pictures for Rob and Alyx to talk about. The other thing is we're going to keep everybody's muted right now, and we're going to keep you muted. It's normally good practice in Zoom meetings, as we've all found out by now, but given how many people we have, it's even more important tonight, so we don't get any of that background noise. So again, for all of you who have questions, the chat's open. Feel free to put them in right now if you want. Find pictures, put them in the chat, and then when we get through the introductory part, then we will get to questions and ask those of Rob and of Alyx. Okay, and if you ever have any technological problems, please put them in the chat as well, and we'll see if between myself and Michael and some of our other staff who are involved, see if we can help you with them. Okay, but hopefully we won't have any, and everyone's pretty used to Zoom by now, so I think it should go pretty well. Okay, so with that, we are going to get started, and we'll start with Rob. Rob, you can unmute yourself. Welcome back to the Fraser River Discovery Centre. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, thanks, Stephen. It's great to be back.
Great. So let's talk a bit about your book. I mean, we have the title, but why did you decide you wanted to do the book? What's the focus on? So maybe a bit of introduction on that.
Sure. Actually, here's the book. Let me just have a look. It is there. And yeah, it started a few years ago when a co-author, Audrey Benedict, came up to have a look at the shorebird migration here in the Fraser. And she said, this is such an incredible story about this migration of birds. We should really think about putting a book together. And along with Jeff Hammerson, who's over in Port Townsend, we decided we'd put our heads together and figure out what we'd actually want to put in this. And so we assembled the book and started to get all the photos together. And Audrey has a team of people that help do this, as editors, photo editors, and so on. And Wendy Chatil, who's the photo editor, went through 8,000 photos to select the ones for us. So not only did the photos have to be stunning photos, but they had to reflect, of course, the text. And so that's how the book all came about. And it came out last year. We had an opening launch down in Seattle. About 600 people came out to that, and that's how it all got started. And then, of course, now we have COVID. COVID-19 has kind of slowed some of the things down, but the book's there. You can buy it on Amazon. Yeah, so that's what it's all about.
Oh, that's great. And so Pacific Flyway. So I think some people know, and we've talked a bit about the Discovery Centre before, that a huge amount of birds migrate through the Fraser estuary every year and to other destinations, and they stop for a while. Can you give us a sense of some of the numbers of birds and species that come through, particularly this time of year?
Yeah, we're right at the peak of the migration of all the neotropical birds. These are birds that spend the winter down in the tropical parts of North America and into South America. So all the warblers and the flycatchers, tanagers, all that are coming through. I went out this morning and I could hear an orange crown, and there's a western tanager crowing up on the top of one of the trees, and there's all kinds of flycatchers and things going through. So actually here in Vancouver, the migration begins even in February with the first arrival of swallows, and then other species trickle through, and the water birds leave. We have lots of birds that spend the winter here, and most of them have left by now. And then behind that come all these other migrants. So we have about every year, annually, about 260 species in the Greater Vancouver area. The total number of birds seen is now, I think, well over 400 in the whole surrounding area. But every year, you can almost be sure to see 260. So when I was doing the report on the Fraser, we wanted to have a look there around the Delta itself, just the Fraser Delta. And even in the coldest part of the winter, we still have about 190 species of birds. And then at this time of year, the numbers go up. And as a result of that, we have birds here all the time. The Fraser is a major wintering area, as well as a migratory stopover site. And it has gone through all kinds of designations. It's been designated as the top sites in the world for things like the shorebird migration. It's a hemispheric site. It's got national wildlife areas, provincial wildlife areas. It's the number one important bird area in all of Canada. It's got loads and loads of designations. And the really good news about it in the report that we just finished, that's a 30-year report. So we went back through the last 30 years to see how we've been doing. And actually, a lot of the water birds are doing quite well. So the conservation work is really paying off. Back in 1987, when I did the first report, only about 1% of the Delta was designated for wildlife. And now it's way up over 30%. So a lot of the intertidal areas are now protected as wildlife management areas. And the outcome of this is that many of these birds have done well. It's not all of them. We still have several that we're concerned about, but many of them have done really well. So that's a positive thing, particularly at this time. We need some good positive news. So I think this is really, really positive. So in terms of the birds that come through, I mentioned all these water birds. We can kind of divide them into the songbirds that I mentioned, about all the warblers and flycatchers. These are all the perching birds that we see around town and around in your backyard. I've seen over close to 100 species just in my backyard. So lots of species will trickle through. If you go down to any of the parks now, go down there in the morning in particular, you can hear them all singing away. The symphony has arrived, and we'll be hearing all these birds as the breeding season gets underway through June. And it's really something you've got to take in. You've got about two months roughly to go down there and just in the morning, just listen to the birds. We call it the dawn chorus. Just as the sun's coming up, all the birds are singing. So these are birds from all over. You don't have to know the names and all that. Just enjoy the sounds, the calls and things. The other group that comes through, of course, all these water birds. And so many of these are things like the ducks, the geese, the seabirds, and so on. And we have, as I think many people know, we have a lot of waterfowl here, particularly birds like the snow goose. They have numbers upwards of about 100,000 of those now. They breed up on Wrangel Island and come through. But we also have loons and grebes and some of the seabirds. And along our coast, there's a migration of birds that are going to their nesting sites out on those remote islands. So our general perception is that a bird migration is birds in the south for the winter come up and migrate through and go north for the winter. And there's lots of birds that do that, but we also have birds that go east-west. So western grebes, for example, that will winter here on our coast, will breed in the Canadian prairies. The California gull is another one. It breeds in the prairies, migrates out to the coast, so it migrates east-west. There are species that nest in the south, down in Mexico. They come north looking for fish. And we also have things like some of the shearwaters that breed in places like New Zealand that will cross the Pacific. And we'll have some of the estimates coming down the coast in August, maybe 25 million shearwaters coming along our coast. It's just phenomenal. This is all part of this Pacific flyway. And some of the birds will go, like the Arctic tern, will go all the way down to the tip of South America and come all the way back. And some of them will only go part ways. We also have some that only just go up and down the mountains. So if you've been around feeding birds here through the winter, you've probably seen the little juncos with the white outer tail feathers. They're like a little sparrow, very common, very widespread. They're all over the place in the winter. They're hard to find right now. They've just gone up onto the mountains. And the fairy thrush is another one. They just go up on the mountains. So that's an altitudinal migration. There's altitudinal, there's latitudinal, and there's longitudinal. They go all different directions. The concept of the flyways was actually brought up by a group of conservationists working on waterfowl. And many of the ducks and geese do this north-south migration. And so they divided North America up into these flyways. And that's the Pacific flyway is considered that one that goes along the coast. So that's what our book is all about, is that migration and how they do it. So I thought probably what I should talk a little bit about is exactly how do they do this?
That would be great. Yeah.
How do they make this migration? Well, we've been studying them for many, many years. Our focus has been largely on the western sandpiper, but this applies to many other species as well. And so you kind of have to think about the flight plan for a bird that's spending the winter down in Central or South America and has to come up to breed in the up in the Arctic and then return. So doing this, we often just think that the birds are just on autopilot and they make this flight. It's anything but. It's highly sophisticated. These birds are capable of making unbelievable decisions. Originally, biologists thought that the flight was like a small airplane would make that flight. You'd fly from airport to airport. When you land at the airport, you refuel, then you fly on to the next airport until you get to where you're going. That's what we thought for a long time. Then we found out, started to look at the birds, many of them were leaving without any fuel. I thought, well, what's going on here? Something really bizarre is happening. And we found out that it's much more complex than we think. For one thing, the airports aren't always the same airports. Sometimes they will bypass them. And what they're capable of doing is tracking the weather, the winds, upper level winds. So some of these little sandpipers, for example, down in San Francisco, will rise up and get about 1,000 meters altitude, so they're above the mountains. They catch the high elevation winds and it gives them a tailwind and pushes them north. If you watch the weather reports, they're talking about a low pressure system coming in from the Pacific. You'll see that the winds are turning counterclockwise around that low. That's what the birds are looking for. They're looking for that tailwind that will pull them north, northwest, and they use those low pressure systems. They launch the flight and get north. So they, in some cases, they will double their speed, what they're capable of doing. So we had one bird, for example, where we had a little transmitter on it in San Francisco, and it flew all the way to the Copper River Delta, which is 3,000 kilometers in 40 hours. So you do the math, it's 80 kilometers an hour.
Oh my goodness.
But they can't fly that fast. They only fly 40 kilometers an hour. But with a tailwind, you can give them that jump. So we think this is what's going on. We found out more recently, and with other work that other people are doing, that many birds do this. They take advantage of the winds. Makes a lot of sense. It costs a lot of energy to make these flights. So when they stop and refuel, what they're trying to do is to put on that fat that they can use for the next leg of the journey. And they're waiting for the weather to change. So all of that sounds, just great. But now there's another wrinkle to this. For the person who's in an airplane, of course, it's just a matter of refueling, getting the fuel and flying on. But for a little sandpiper, it starts to fatten up and they can really put on the fat. So they can put on 50, 60% of their body weight in fat in a few days. But the problem with that is, what happens when you get fat? You get slow. And the problem there is, of course, the predators. Can they get them? So a peregrine falcon, which also migrates at the same time for the very same reason, goes after these little sandpipers because they get too fat. So what is a sandpiper to do? It has to have the fuel to make the flight. It has to time it with the winds. It has to avoid that predator. You can see the computer that's going on in its brain is really something else, making these calculations, how to actually do this and do this flight. And so what we did is many years ago, we put a bunch of transmitters on sandpipers down in San Francisco, and then we let them come north. And in those days, all of the recording had to be done manually. So we had to fly and record the birds as they came by. We had a team all the way up through Alaska. We kept track of the movement of these little sandpipers as they migrated north. So we had the actual data from individual sandpipers, how fast they migrated. And so we went back to the computer and worked out a model of this, let's put predators in, we'll put winds in, we'll put food in. We can see which is the most important thing for them. And we were able to run this whole model. And what it came out, which was really remarkable, maybe not when you think about these birds, if you take the absolute best best decisions for these birds so that they arrive just at the right time in the computer model and compare it to what they actually did, they were just slightly behind it.
Oh.
They were almost absolutely perfect. So they could, for example, they could go up to a stopover site like the Fraser, and they could decide to stay longer and then bypass the next one. If the winds were good, or if they had enough fat, they could make all those kind of little decisions. And that's exactly what we found. Some will make different decisions. Some will make that, like I said, that one made that one flight all the way to Alaska. Others stopped at all the sites on migration. And this is what we're finding, like this migration is a very, very complex thing that's going on for these birds, trying to balance these needs back and forth. So what we tried to do in the book, Pacific Flyways, to tell you about this story, about how they do this. And there are many other aspects to it as well, about the different types of birds and the role of feathers and the role of the migration, the routes they take, and all of that. Trying to give you a sense of this incredible dynamic. Some of the current estimates are that there's about, of all of the land birds going south, there's about 4 billion of them that leave Canada going south. It gives you sort of an idea of the magnitude of the migration. It's dropped from what it was in the past, they believe, but that's the current estimates. So we have many millions of birds coming through the province going south that are just the songbirds. And then there's all these water birds I told you about as well. So Vancouver is very fortunate that we have birds that are coming through at all times, birds that are migrating, birds that are spending the winter here, and birds that are breeding. So you can go bird watching anytime and you'll see lots of birds. One of the reasons that we got going, and Alyx is going to talk to you a little bit about this, of the bird celebration was because we do have so many birds. And she can tell you a little bit about the background of that, why this all came about. What I'd suggest is if you're really interested in birds and want to get out and maybe start to learn a little bit about them, the best thing is to go down to one of your local parks. Of course, to follow all the guidelines, the health guidelines, but just go down there and, like I say, listen for these birds. Look very carefully. And one thing you'll find is that as you start to watch them, start to identify them and get a little closer, you'll see that there's a whole world there that will unfold in front of you that you may not have known even existed. And I want to also just warn you of this, that once you start to do this, it will draw you into nature. We say that birds are the gateway to nature. You start to watch it, and then you start watching, you're looking at the plants, and then you're looking at the insects. And before you know it, you're really getting into the nature that's all around you. And as we know, nature is very good for us. We've seen this very strongly through the pandemic. It's been reinforced that watching birds or just enjoying nature is really good for our mental health. We've known that for a long time, but it's been really reinforced now through this pandemic. So it's another reason why we want to have birds around the city, so that you can see that it's good for you. Some of the more recent stuff is showing that it's not just the numbers of birds, it's actually the diversity, the numbers of species that people really like to have. And we sure have a nice diversity of birds here in Vancouver, so we're very fortunate for that. And many of the cities, New Westminster is doing this, Delta has done it, has started to put in a biodiversity plan and bird strategies as well to try to ensure that there will be birds around the city. We used to think that the cities were really poor areas for birds and you had to go out into the countryside to see them. That's really being debunked now. We're finding that many of the species, they may not be very abundant in the city, but we do have a good diversity of them. And to just give you a kind of a taste of that, a little sense of that, when we had the Canada Head's 150th celebration a few years ago, I wanted to see if I could see 150 species in Vancouver before July the 1st, before the 150th birthday. And I was able to do that. It took me until middle of June, but 150 species in the city of Vancouver, just in the first 6 months or so. So there are lots of birds around. Now, one thing, Stephen, I did send some photos over for you.
Yeah, so maybe Michael, you want to share, may want to share the first photo, Michael. Maybe while he's doing that, Rob, we mentioned the pandemic, which is why we're virtual. Have you noticed over the past couple of years any differences with the migration because of or in COVID or affected by COVID?
Well, we're all restricted by it as well, so we're not getting out as
yeah,
often.
yeah.
They've noticed this in eBird, which is the online app for recording birds, that the number of reports coming in, of course, has fallen.
Right.
People aren't getting out as much. But one thing is that I think everybody knows this, but when we had the lockdown and everything was quiet a year ago, all of a sudden everybody heard all the birds.
Right.
So they commented about it. I can hear the birds again. They're out there. So the birds are around, and our background noises and things, mute them, but they are there. There's lots of birds around.
That's great. Okay, Michael, you want to share a photo for us?
There we go. So this is the Western Sandpiper. This is the one that we have been studying for many years. This is a photo by Tom Middleton, and these little sandpipers come through here in huge numbers. The migration is pretty much over now. It occurs in the end of April and into the first week or so of May. You may still find a few stragglers. The best place to see these would be in the springtime, would be down at Brunswick Point, which is right at the mouth of the Fraser River. So if you go down towards the Rifle Bird Sanctuary, Brunswick Point is very close by. You just have to check on the map. But you can walk out on the dike there and you can see flocks of 50 to 100,000 on many of the busy days. Sometimes it'll be more, 150,000, and they're tremendous numbers. So these birds are heading north to breed, and they'll be in Alaska. Now, the amazing thing about it is the first day of spring, first day of summer, June 21st, the females will be starting to arrive going south. They go up, lay the eggs, they leave them to the male once the young hatch, and then they they depart. So the males are looking after the young sandpipers in Alaska, while the females are heading south. So again, out to Brunswick Point or even into Boundary Bay, there's a good spot. And you can see all these little sandpipers running around the beach. So this is ours, the Western sandpiper. There's 3 to 4 million of them, we think, in the world. And the Fraser Delta is one of the major stopover sites for them.
That's great. All right. All right. Next photo, Michael.
Yeah, okay, so these are the local gulls. People talk about seagulls. It's not really correct to call them seagulls because some of them don't breed on the sea. We just call them gulls. And this is the glaucous-winged gull, which nests around the Salish Sea. Some of them are on buildings around town. You'll see the odd one. There's some on a few buildings here in New West, and there's some in Port Moody and downtown. These ones are going after sand lance. They're diving down to get sand lance, it's a fish just below the surface. These are all adults, the white head and the dark back. You see some of them have blackish wingtips. Those could be hybrids between glaucous wing and western gulls. These ones, this is the common gull. You'll see it all around town. When you think of seagull, this is the one. So it's very common. And we're right near the center of the range. There's lots of them that breed right on the local islands. So out in Howe Sound on Christie Island, there's one. There's a huge colony, Mandarty Island down near Sydney. And there's another big one on Middle Natch up towards Campbell River. And plus many other small ones. But this is the common gull around our coast. And it's here all year round.
Great. All right. Next one, Michael.
Yeah, so the surf scoters. These birds, whoops. There. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the resolution isn't all that great on this one. This is a surf scoter, and it's a sea duck. So they breed up mostly in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, that area, and then they come down to the coast for the winter. And you'll see huge numbers of them right off Stanley Park. And one thing, if you really start to get into birds, there are times when birds are here in big numbers and you should go and see them. So I told you about the sandpiper. This one, you can see right off Stanley Park, off Siwash Rock and that sort of area in October. And they'll come in to feed on the mussels right along the edge of the shore. And you'll see flocks there of 1,000, 2,000, maybe even pushing 3,000 at times. And these are mostly the males that you see. There's a few females with the brown marked ones, but the orange, white, and black ones are the males. And they're coming into shore to dive down and get a hold of the mussels that are on the rocks, and they tear them off, and then they just swallow them whole, and the gizzard takes care of the rest. There's big numbers out in Howe Sound as well, and mostly around rocky shorelines. So this is one that is common here in the winter. Hard to find now. There's a few non-breeders hanging around for the summer, but not many. But in the winter, this is, if you go to the shore, Stanley Park, you're bound to see this.
All right, that's great. And what's the name of those ones again, Rob?
Surf scoter, S-C-O-T-E-R.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. All right, Michael.
Yes, this is another one of Tom Middleton's photos. This one is the bufflehead. It's a small duck. This is the male with beautiful iridescent color. And they're found in all the little bays all around the coast here, the south coast. This is an unusual duck. We usually think of ducks nesting on the shore in a grassy nest. This one nests in holes in trees. And, many of them breed in the caribou, in the interior around the ponds, and in holes in trees, aspens and cottonwoods up in the interior. They fly up there, they just do an overnight flight, and they're in there onto the lakes and have their young, and then they'll come back to the coast. And Kerry Finley over in Sydney keeps track of when they arrive, and he thinks that they are a good signal, a good sort of weather bird. It comes in when the cold weather is starting to move down through the continent. And he has an event now over there he calls All Buffleheads Day, when you go out to have a look, see when the buffleheads have come back. It's a beautiful little bird. This is the male. The female is more drab with just a little bit of white on the head, but otherwise brown. But a lovely little duck, and all around here, all around our shores, all around Stanley Park.
Great. All right, Michael.
Oh
my goodness.
Yeah, so these are Dunlin. If you look carefully, you'll see that they have black bellies. So this is in the breeding season. This would be taken in the spring, probably April, maybe March, April, something like that. So you can see the little black patch down there. That's characteristic of the Dunlin. And the Dunlin, there's Dunlin all around the world, but ours, our subspecies of Dunlin, breeds in Alaska and comes down and spends the winter along our coast. The Fraser Delta is a big spot. We get 40, 50,000 of them in the winter. And you may have seen those online murmurations from Boundary Bay of some of the people have been filming. That's the species, is the Dunlin. The peregrine falcons go after them and create these big flocks that are called the murmurations. And this is a common species down on the Delta. You won't see them up around the city very often, but certainly down there. And huge numbers migrate north with the western sandpipers as well. They are truly a real wildlife spectacle for the Fraser Delta.
Wow, amazing. Look at them all. That's incredible. We have another one, Michael?
Yes, well, we have to have this, of course. I think everybody knows this one. This is the snow goose. White body with the pink bill on the adults, and you can't really see it very well, but they have a black sort of lips, and it looks like they're kind of grinning. So that's characteristic of them. The grayer ones are the young ones of the year. So this is in the spring. Obviously, the grass is coming up, and the young ones are starting to molt into the breeding plumage. They stay together. The families stay together through the winter, and then they return to the breeding ground. Our snow geese go to Wrangel Island in Russia. So these are the Siberian Orchestra, I like to call them. They come south, and there's a group that go down to California, and there's a group that come here to the Skagit and the Fraser. So ours will be here or in the Skagit through the winter, and big numbers of them, and they're a conservation success story. They're starting to become very numerous, and there's issues around all of that, but it has been a success to have them. And you could sometimes hear them overhead in the springtime. You hear, if you listen very carefully, you can hear the calls up above. You look up and you see the great big V. I had some friends up on Cortez Island telling me that over a period of a couple of days, they saw huge flocks of these way up in the sky going over just one after another. They see thousands and thousands of these geese heading up to the northwest, off to Wrangel Island. Big numbers arrive here in October, right around Thanksgiving. So I like to think of it as, when Thanksgiving comes and the pumpkins and all this, so do the snow geese. Best place to see them is down at the Rifle Bird Sanctuary, although they're now they're going out onto fields in Richmond and other parts of the Delta. But that's a good spot to see them. So we're very fortunate. And one thing about this too, Steve, I just want to mention this, is that with all these birds, bird watching is becoming very, very popular, and there's a lot of money being spent on it and things. What we've been saying in our reports is, we should really be taking advantage of this, that the success of the conservation is one thing, but there's also a whole economic aspect to this, that, this can be part of something much wider. It can be part of, have a sort of a cultural connection, and it can also have a bigger connection in terms of just the economics. We estimated that just the current bird watching in the deltas brings in about $10 to $11 million annually. That's just under the current one. It's not really, and it's still pretty small. So it has a great potential. Alyx will tell you a little bit more during the bird celebration, but one of the things that we've been trying to do is talk to people who are inspired by birds. My interest, I got interested in birds through science, but some people might come through by dance or through music, or all different aspects. And that's what we try to do. Keep it open for everybody. Let everybody participate in this. Enjoy the birds, and tell us about them. Whether you like to photograph them or write poems about them, whatever it is. We're just so lucky to have this that here, right around where we live, is one of the best birding places in all of Canada. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Those are great photos. Thanks so much. So we are going to go to Alyx in a second, but maybe while you unscreen share, congratulations on the award that your book just won. Can you tell us a little bit about the award, and did you have to apply or for it, or how did it work?
Well, that's a good question, Stephen. It's called the Nautilus Award, the book award, and they give out a gold medal and a silver medal, and there's quite a few different categories. Ours got silver medal, and I'm not sure who submitted it, but somebody did. Yeah. And it's out of the US, and they have a panel of people from, it's a very it's an independent, really mixed group of people. So there's, scientists and professors and, various people in the community, artists and all that. They all get together and they go through, and they have a set of criteria on them. It's supposed to be inspirational and knowledgeable, educational. So we're delighted to see that happen. So. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, again, congratulations on that award. And I know a number of people in the chat have asked where you can buy Rob's book. And it's available on Amazon. We put the link in the chat. And Rob, do you want to just raise it up and show people the cover one more time so they can see it? And there it is. And we're going to give away a copy of this book later on in the week to a lucky person. And I'm going to talk to Rob and see if there's opportunities for us to maybe carry it in our gift store at the Discovery Centre. People can drop in and buy it. So that's great.
One other aspect to it you might be interested in is that we looked at the major migratory stopover sites between Alaska and Tierra del Fuego, and they're all in here with photographs. So
fabulous! You
can actually see the places that they're all listed in here, so to give you a good feel of the kind of migration.
And when we can't travel right now, it's kind of like you can get to travel through the book. So that's nice. Yeah. All right, Alyx. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Alyx. And I'm really interested in the Vancouver Bird Celebration and the name change and the events. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, Vancouver Bird Celebration is an annual event. And it's inspired by World Migratory Bird Day. And this year is running for its 10th anniversary from May 8th to 16th, with a few events kind of sprinkled through the month after that as well. And the aim of the celebration is really to encourage everyone to get to know our local birds. As Rob was talking about, there are over 250 species that either live or pass through our area. And so the goal is to inspire that spark moment that so many birders that I've spoken to or met can recall experiencing themselves. And that spark can really motivate people to get involved in bird conservation and take steps in their everyday lives to protect our birds. So it's also a really wonderful opportunity to learn about our local organizations that explore birding from different perspectives. So so some of them might be the ecology lens that we hear about so often, ecology and science. It could be the education, arts and technology lens. We just did a panel on Saturday and spoke to Adam Dalla, who just created a Find the Birds phone game that you can download and play. So there's so many different perspectives that people look at for birds. And so the bird celebration is really aiming at exploring all of those different ways. The bird celebration is organized by Vancouver Bird Advisory Committee, which in itself is a collaborative partnership for nonprofit, artists, and other institutions to celebrate birds around the region. And Rob was our previous chair of the committee. So so it's a really passionate crew behind the event.
Right. And do you get, I mean, obviously we're in the middle of COVID, but what's the participation like normally in Vancouver Bird Week or the Bird Celebration?
Yeah, I mean, it changes obviously because of COVID, but one of the interesting elements of moving to mostly online programs is that we can reach a whole new audience from that. And that kind of leads into a bit of the name change. So the change from Vancouver Bird Week to Vancouver Bird Celebration came up because we just kept thinking bigger. So for one, it allows the celebration to be longer than just 1 week. We're not confined to just a bird week. It can be as long of a celebration as we'd like it to be. And then the bigger piece is that we'd like to take bird celebration nationwide, working with Birds Canada and the folks leading the Toronto Bird Celebration. And you can even catch some of the Toronto events this year through the online format. So we're cross-posting between two, so you can attend the Toronto events and people in Toronto can attend the Vancouver event. So it's just a bigger reach in general. So it's exciting.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And celebrities. Tell me a little bit about celebrities.
Yes. Well, for those who want to get outdoors and see some of our local birds in your own neighborhood or in nearby parks, it's a great time to go celebrity spotting and see how many of these stars you can find. So maybe I can share my screen. I can show you a little bit more about what I mean. Go find the spot. Okay, can you see this one? You good?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, yeah. And so, well, just before I go into each of the celebrities or some of them, we picked 6 celebrities, so birds that you can find all over our region, which you can use as sort of a treasure hunt, or you can also tell us about your sightings on social media to win some really cool prizes. There are some bird courses from Pastorina Bird Connection and a festival pass from Planet in Focus Environmental Film Festival that we're giving away. And so I'll introduce you to a couple of the celebrities that you might recognize. The first one here is our Anna's hummingbird, which I had to start with because it's Vancouver's elected city bird. And you can usually see them flitting around flower gardens and neighborhood feeders. Or if you learn their like scratchy, kissy sound kind of call, you can you'll start noticing them or hearing them everywhere. So this is one you can keep your eye out for. And the other, let's see, is that you can look out for is the tree swallow. And so their maneuvering is really fun to watch as they kind of dart around the tops of ponds and other bodies of water, catching insects midair. And so they're a fun one to keep your eye out for too. So there are 6 celebrities in total. You can see all of them on social media. And so on our Instagram page at Van Bird Celebration. And then there are some ways to enter if you want to enter into the contest to win some of those prizes by following, commenting, tagging some friends, or sharing a photo of your own if you post your photos to social media. And so we'll be doing the second draw on Friday.
Great. Excellent. And you mentioned that doesn't just have to be a week long. How long does the celebration go on?
Yeah, our like official end date this year is the 16th, so on Sunday, but there are a couple of events through to pretty close to the end of May.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. And the other one, and Rob mentioned it, and maybe you can comment, or Rob, you talked about experiencing birds for different reasons. And Rob mentioned art and music. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of experience would work for some people?
Yeah. Well, there are lots of different groups that put on different events for Vancouver Bird Celebration. And then they touch on those topics in different ways. So art is one. There are a handful of events that we have going on where people can learn skills in drawing or sketching birds. Okay. Richmond Nature Park is hosting a couple of them this weekend. And then through like music and that kind of thing. Earlier on in the event, there were some dawn chorus events where you can kind of listen to the birds and help identify the different bird sounds that you hear. And so, yeah, those are a couple of examples.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I've talked to Rob about this in the past, but some of the bird aficionados they're very enthusiastic. I've heard of bird costumes and parades and all that kind of stuff. And obviously we're in COVID, so we wouldn't see that right now. But it sounds like people who love birds, some people really love birds. Can you talk a bit about that, or Rob jump in and talk about maybe examples of that people might not know about?
Yeah, well, on Saturday, we actually honored Carmen Rosen of Still Moon Art Society for her role in putting together sort of what you're talking about, this bird parade that happened in 2018 when the Ornithological Congress happened in Vancouver. And for that event, they created these elaborate costumes of some of our local birds, and had stilt walkers imitating the movements of those birds, the movements and the sounds. And she was a big part of helping to put that together. And yes, that's one example. Maybe Rob, you might be able to speak in more detail, but if you were there or saw any of the photos there, the costumes are beautiful.
Yeah, that parade, I think I think it's on YouTube still. You can find it. So we opened the festival and the Congress with this, and it was live on the CBC National News, and on their Facebook production. It had 2.2 million people watch it.
That's crazy.
And so they couldn't believe it, the number of people. And like Alyx said, these costumes were people who, there was Carmen and Paula Jardine who got a city grant to put the costumes together and get people to actually make the costumes. So it was part of an extended arts event starting in February. And so they learned to walk on stilts and to move like the birds that they had decided to be. And it was funny, people became very possessive. You know, I am the spotted towhee, you are not. They learned all about it, what the bird was like and how they moved and all of that. So when they were in the parade, they just mimicked those birds, and they really became them. And we had so much fun with that when people came back and talked about this event. I think there were about 300 people in total, and wow. Some of them from Toronto and some from the prairies and up north and in the interior. They all came together. So what we're thinking about was, wouldn't it be fun to do something like this if we can get other cities going? Have something like this, and maybe you could go on a virtual bird tour. So you can go birding in Halifax in the morning, and then go to Toronto, and then you could come out to the prairies and maybe to Vancouver, and we can do it all online as a virtual kind of thing. And it'd be a lot of fun to sort of bring the country together and have a lot of fun. And maybe we can increase the kind of things that we're showing, some of the events and things. Maybe having some musical pieces, and maybe some other things that we can share all across the country. Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. I think maybe one of the only good things about COVID is the virtual audience and the virtual participation. It has really risen, and I think a lot of people are going to want to continue to participate that way. And so why not figure out ways for them to do that? I think that's great. The other thing Rob and I have joked about, because Rob's an expert on crows as well, is maybe we would do some kind of an event at the Discovery Centre where you had to wear a crow costume and come dressed as a crow, and it would be a fundraiser, and it would be a real celebration. And I think when we're able to do that, everyone's going to need something like that. So maybe that's something we can think about for 2022 when everyone's safe again. But yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah. Okay, let's go to some of the questions. And Michael, I'll start. I've gone right back to the beginning here. And so obviously the book, Rob, is on the Pacific Flyway, and you mentioned you've been studying it for many years, and that things are generally pretty good with most of the birds. But are there threats to the flyway and to the birds that use it? And what has been done about them, and what more needs to be done about them?
Yeah, there is. I mean, when you think about this, because the birds are flying between countries, it obviously has to be an international effort. And so part of the work originally was to try to find out where they're going and what are the sites and how important are they. So we have quite a bit of information on that, and there are a lot of sites all along the flyway. But one thing they can do is that you now have a collective voice, because they're not our birds; they're everybody's birds, and so we're all trying to maintain them. And the thing that I really noticed that over the last 10, 15 years is that birding used to be a kind of a quirky thing for a small number of people, but it's become so mainstream now, and so many people want to be part of this. You can see the cities are doing this, putting in bird strategies and biodiversity strategies and greening of this and that. It's all very promising. So I'm very optimistic about it. The species that are really in trouble, they really need to have focused work done on them, find out what the cause of that is, and then try to protect them. But the thing that I've noticed now is that, with the internet and all the international connections, it's just changed it dramatically. When I started the work, I had a colleague in Panama, and we didn't have the internet back then. I'd have to try to reach him by phone, try to discuss what we were going to do, and send him things on faxes, and it was just so archaic. And now we're so much more advanced. So I think that's one of them, that we can have these common voices. And we can also design things so that we don't duplicate. We can, if we're going to do some bird counts and things, maybe there's certain places that are best places to count them. Usually when birds on the wintering ground is the best place because they're not moving around. When they're migrating, it's really difficult to count. So there's all those kind of advantages, and all kinds of things spin out of those, all kinds of other activities that come out of them. And actually this whole thing with the bird celebration and Bird Week actually originated from seeing some of that in other parts of the world, of how people were responding, how Indigenous people were responding, and how people from all different nationalities were responding in their own unique way. And I thought, this is so cool that the birds are far bigger than just the birds themselves. It's really become part of their cultures. And so can we do this, maintain these? And ultimately, this is what I would like to see, is to be able to bring people from all around the world and put up the stage there and allow people to talk about birds and what nature means to them, and get us all inspired.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, I mean, based on attendance here and what you've done in the past, it seems to be something that cuts across, age groups, demographics, where you live, this love of birds and wanting to learn about them and enjoy them. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Here's a really specific question for you. What recommendations would you have for northern flickers that are nesting in building walls?
This is an issue. First of all, flickers also do a lot of drumming. So if you have a tin chimney or some metal plating on your house, they will use it for drumming, because this is the way they communicate. A lot of birds sing, and the flickers drum. A lot of woodpeckers do this. They drum. So that can be really annoying. And the other one is what this person has said about drilling into the side of the houses. One thing that seems to work fairly well is take an old CD and put a piece of string around it and just put it nearby so it turns in the wind. That seems to do it. The other thing would be to provide the flicker with a nest box where you want it. Go put the nest box where you want it, then hang up the CD, and maybe they'll go and use that one. If they're well into it now and they have eggs and all the rest, it's probably unlikely they're going to move. But when they start doing it, give them a nest box somewhere else so they give them the idea.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. That's a really specific example. That's great. Thank you, Alyx. I wanted to ask you. Rob mentioned the interest in the bird celebration and among different demographics and age groups. Have you? What is the demographic that gets involved? Is it all over the place? Is it tend to be certain age groups? What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I feel like it's growing. I think the audience that is involved in the bird community is growing and changing. We work with a lot of school groups and kids that are coming in to learn about birds, but we also have had a really successful hipster bird walk for the kind of millennial age group coming out to bird walks to learn about different birds that are around and to kind of collect for their life lists. Different sightings like that. So I think it's really changing and growing in that way. I was speaking about Adam Dalla, the 15-year-old who created that Find the Birds game. We were speaking recently, and he's really passionate about bringing in people of his age group into the birding community and seeing more people like him out at bird walks. And so it's cool to see the younger age groups getting into birding in that way.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, excellent. There's a question, Rob, from your example of the migration and the different things, the wind and the stopover points and everything. The question is it an individual bird decision on where to go and when to leave, or is it a flock decision, or how does that work?
We're pretty sure it's an individual one. So the original computer models were done as flocks and they didn't work very well. But now we have the sophisticated ones, more sophisticated ones, where you can actually have individuals in the computer and run it and then compare to what you've got. And the individual ones are the ones that work out the best. And it makes the most sense. Each individual bird will make its own decision. Now, that doesn't mean they don't go in flocks. They do. If you go down to the delta on the high tide, you'll hear they give a certain whistle. and then you'll see these flocks start to rise, and you might see 50,000 birds all take off, and they're all heading to Alaska, all in formation. Off they go. We've seen this with geese, of course. They form into the big V's, and they do go together. So there's a lot of that, but that's part of the decision too. An individual doesn't have to go with the flock, but it might be, the flock's going, maybe I'll go too. So yeah, we're pretty sure they're individual decisions.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Another question, maybe for both of you or one of you. I'm not sure who could answer, but climate change. Have you noticed any impacts over the years of climate change on migration behaviors, or the flyway, or birds just in the Vancouver or the Fraser Basin?
Well, it's interesting. Within there've been a lot of studies, of course, around the world looking at the possible impact of climate change, and there are some signals of birds responding to a warming climate. There's still some uncertainty in some of it. You would expect birds to adjust, and some of them are coming a little bit earlier, a few days earlier. It might be due to climate and all that. You'd expect them to do this because if you look at those models, the migration and how they shows how they move, they can adjust it a day or two one way or the other quite easily. So you'd expect that. Here locally, we haven't really seen any massive changes in it. There was some thought that maybe the Anna's hummingbird had come north because of warming climate, but it appears that it's more to do with people putting out bird feeders. They can stay for the winter, and also maybe changes in gardens and things like that. So there hasn't been any big ones. There are some that go on. I guess you'd call them. It's to do with climate. We have periods in the ocean where we have very cold water and very warm water, and it's the whole oceanographic effect, and that has an effect on the breeding success of some of the seabirds, the puffins and some of the auklets and so on. And that's been fairly well established that goes up and down depending on those ocean conditions. And that's like the El Nino effects and things on birds.
Right.
Yeah, birds are pretty adaptable and capable of making some amazing things. They've been around for a long time, since the dinosaurs. So
yeah, no, exactly. I imagine if there were climate change impacts on their habitat, for example, in the estuary, lower water levels, not as much water, vegetation that's changed because of warmer temperatures, would that have an impact either in the medium term or the longer term?
Possibly in the longer term, I would think, yes.
Yeah.
If they're changing the amount of habitat, then that will
have
that effect. We need to keep on top of those things and try to find other solutions for them. But birds are remarkably capable of taking advantage of things, and so generally what we find is you stop persecuting them, stop polluting them, and give them peace, and maybe the birds can do very well.
Right. Yeah. Another question about migration, and she's used the example of the juncos. I hope I'm pronouncing that word correctly. But when birds migrate, do they all go, or do sometimes some stay behind? And if so, why would they stay? And do they still thrive when they stay behind? How does that work?
Okay, it's quite complex, all of this. So I think what she's referring to is that among the adults, there are some that stay around. So here in Vancouver, you can find a few juncos breeding. Mm-hmm. Most of them move, most of them migrate and go up into the mountains. So yes, there are some that will hang around. We also have things like golden crown sparrows here in the wintertime. They breed in the high alpine, so they just can't really make it here. They move out. There are others, some of the shorebirds and a few of the others that will hang out. So like the western sandpiper that I was telling you about, the young sandpipers that go to Panama stay for the year, so they wait a year before they go north. But the same species, when it's in Mexico, which is half the distance to Alaska, all of them appear to migrate out as yearlings. So it depends on the location. So yeah, it's not a simple answer. Same thing with those surf scoters. You see small numbers here in the summer. They may not have got a mate, or they may not feel very well, or whatever the reason is, and they'll hang around and wait till the next year or so. And not all birds breed in their first year. Some of them wait many years before they breed.
Right. question about herons, and there are specifically about whether the heron babies in Stanley Park have arrived for the year. Do you have an update on herons in the park?
Let Alyx take this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, Stanley Park Ecological Society, we work with the park board monitoring the herons in Stanley Park. And so about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 at this point, we saw the first baby herons hatching from the eggs. So it'll be kind of continuous, and some of the herons will could have later eggs that hatch. So yeah, it'll be continuous, kind of starting from now.
Oh wow, that's great.
There's also a heron cam that Stanley Park runs. So if you just Google Stanley Park heron cam, you can go in and actually look yourself right now.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's great. And since we got you, and I don't know, maybe you don't want to give this away, you want people to go find themselves, but what are the other 4 celebrities that you have?
Yeah. Well, you can go and you can see all the images on Instagram, but I'll tell you anyway. The other 4 are the barred owl is one, the great blue heron, as we were just talking about, red-winged blackbirds, and pileated woodpecker is the 4th.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Some of these are on bus shelters too, all through the city.
Yeah, you can catch them around. If you can't find the birds themselves, you might be able to see some of the bus shelters versions.
Okay, great. So Michael, do you want to? We've got a number of pictures or photos in the chat. I don't know if you've been able to download any of them. Did you want to share 1 or 2 of them?
Yeah, we have. We've had quite a few. They're all absolutely gorgeous. Let me go ahead and share my screen. That's the button. And let's start with this one.
Oh, nice.
What's that one?
This is a house finch.
Yeah.
So it's a common bird around the city. It's got a beautiful song, and if you put a bird feeder out, you're likely to get them.
Yeah.
So this is a male, and you can see the orange around the face, and there's a little bit of orange on the rump.
Yeah.
And on the sides, they're kind of striped. So it's a little sparrow-sized bird, but it's actually a finch. It's got a little notch in the tail.
Yeah.
And on the bird surveys around the city, you see them all over the place. They'll nest in shrubs around your house, and if you have a bird feeder, like I say, you're bound to have them. So it's a beautiful little bird.
Oh, that's great. All right, you got another one, Michael?
Oh, I do. I have, let's see, this one. This is one of the first ones that was shed. So the name is actually given away at the top left corner of the screen, but
we're still seeing the old one. Maybe you have to get rid of that one.
Let me just, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'll try this again. Okay, we're back at this one. I just want to switch to this one. Has the switch worked?
No.
Nope, we're getting the same one.
Darn, technical difficulties. I do apologize.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, I will do this once again.
I'll find some other questions if we...
Here's what I found.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, this is the American widgeon. It's a widgeon like pigeon, but with a W. It used to be called the bald pate because of the white top to its head. And this is one of the most numerous ducks around the Fraser during the winter. They feed on grass, so they come up onto lawns and into parks and into turf farms and into farms themselves. Huge numbers of them down in Boundary Bay. If you go down there in October, when the migration's at its peak, it's just the bay is jam full of them. And it's a favorite prey of bald eagles. They love to hunt them and chase them around. So huge flocks of these beautiful, beautiful little birds. They often come into the fields at night. So you don't really see them in the fields in the middle of the winter very often. They're usually in the bay. But Stanley Park, lots of them down there, Lost Lagoon. If you go near any body of water, you're bound to see one of these in the winter.
Yeah, that's great. You got another one, Michael?
I do. 1 second. Because they were all sent to me individually, I have to keep ending and restarting my share.
Maybe
If
while
there's
you're
a better
doing
way for this, I will.
no,
have to
no.
figure it out for
While
next
you're
time.
doing that, Rob, maybe I'll ask you a question. When the birds start to chirp or sing in the mornings, what I've noticed around our place is I would have thought it would have been when dawn starts or when it starts to get light, but it seems to happen at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Why would it be so early at this time? Is there any reason for that, or is it an anomaly? Any thoughts on that?
Maybe I have to ask you why you're up at 3 in the morning.
Because the bird wakes me up outside my window.
There are birds that will sing actually throughout the night. And
Oh, okay.
in some cases around the city with the increased light, some of them are kind of being, they're singing earlier and earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but the majority of birds start, around dawn, and you can almost set your clock to it.
Yeah.
Certain ones come on at a certain time.
Yep.
And they sing early in that they're announcing their territory. And then as the sun starts to come up, they get out and get busy feeding.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Michael?
Yes, I have another one. Just a
Okay.
second. Here we go. This is a cute one.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Okay, it's really distinctive. You see that black cap on the yellow bird?
Yeah.
That's the Wilson's warbler. And there's loads of them coming through right now. And we'll get them in our yards, like you can see here. They come right into your backyard. They tend to be low down in the shrubs. They don't go very high up in the trees. And very distinctive, that yellow bird with the black cap. And some of them will hang around for the breeding season and go on for the winter. So I love these little guys. They're so full of energy, and they spend the winter down in Mexico, down through Central America, and then come north here. So yeah, that's great. It's a nice photo.
That's a great picture. Yeah.
All right. Have a couple more. We do also have a couple of questions.
Yeah, maybe I'll do one of the questions while you're loading. And
Sure.
it's an interesting one about putting up bird feeders in the yard versus encouraging or letting the birds eat bugs and stuff in the garden. Is it an either or thing, or are both okay from a bird perspective? Any thoughts on that?
Alex, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to take it?
Well, I can give my initial thoughts, but you can maybe flesh it out. I mean, I would say that, like, based on my knowledge of birds, like either the birds would be eating the insects or the seeds, and not always both. So, yeah. And one, I guess, plus of having a bird feeder out is that you're not hand feeding them. You're a little bit further away, and so you're not really encouraging bad bird behavior. They're not getting dangerously close to humans. But I'll let Rob kind of fill in the blanks of that answer.
No, that's good. Yeah, the other aspect is when they have young, they have to build protein for the muscle, and so seeds and things aren't really much of their diet. They're looking for insects, and they'll go and find it themselves, feed those to the young, and so often the number of birds at the bird feeder falls off, and all the seed eaters, the sparrows and things, are off nesting somewhere else, so we have fewer of them, so you won't get as much. But one thing I just mentioned a few things about bird feeding is that. The worry is, birds hitting windows. There's millions of birds killed hitting windows. So if you put up a bird feeder, it may seem counterintuitive, but what they're recommending is put the feeder close to the window rather than far away. And close is like within a meter or two of the window, because the birds don't have enough time to accelerate if they do hit the window. If they're further away, they get going so fast they hit the window and break their necks. You can also treat the windows, putting things on so the birds can see it, and so they don't hit the windows. I've done that on the offending windows at my house. And I think, Alex, isn't there plans for one in town as well? All the windows at the park board office were treated. I think there's plans for some of the others.
Yeah, there's plans in the works for a city location for sure of and a beautifully designed window marker. That'll be nice to see.
Yeah, so this is a case of using art. When you look at it, you think it's art, but it's actually to deflect the birds. There's one going in at the UBC Botanical Gardens, which is a beautiful piece of artwork of the birds that are there in the garden. And it's meant to keep the birds off the window. When you look at it, you think, wow, what a nice piece of art. So that's a really creative way of solving a problem with something very artistic. One other thing about the bird feeders is hummingbird feeders. It's important to clean those on a regular basis, once a week or so. You really want to make sure those stay clean. You don't want to get any infestation in them. So it's really important to do that.
Right. All right, Michael, do you have another photo for us?
I certainly do. All right, let's try this one.
Oh,
those look like snow geese. Yeah, they must be. If you look along on the ground, you see all the little white dots there. Those are all snow geese there.
okay.
And, they're silhouetted, but I'm sure those are all snow geese. And the location is also down on the delta there. That looks like I think that's right at Brunswick Point, looking across the Fraser. Pretty sure that's where that is. So yeah, those would be the snow geese. So those, many of those are gone now, and they're all headed up to Wrangel Island. So come back at Thanksgiving, and you'll see them all come back.
That's great. I got a question. The mandarin ducks in Burnaby Lake or on Burnaby Lake, do they migrate, or are they full-time residents there? Do you know?
Well, they look like they're full-time residents. It's been there for, it's just the third year now, or maybe even the fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've been around, and yeah, it's a beautiful bird.
Yeah.
It's a good way to get going. That and the wood duck. See those two? Boy, those are gems.
Wow.
Right
Where would they have come from, Rob? Like, would they have strayed here, or?
Well, it's a possibility that they escaped.
Okay.
Had some captive ones and they escaped. They're from Asia,
Right.
and you get birds from Asia periodically, so it's kind of tough to tell these apart. Whether they escaped or not.
Right.
Nice to have one around.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other photos, Michael?
Oh yeah, we have so many photos. Oh, absolutely beautiful. Thank you to everyone who shared these photos with us. They're gorgeous.
Oh, there we go. There's the wood duck. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the male wood duck. So these are another one of the hole nesting birds. They nest in native holes and trees, but also by putting up bird boxes, you'll get them nesting in them. And they are here historically, but through the Natural History Society over the years, and then many of the game clubs and others, some of the parks have put up bird boxes, and these birds do very, very well. So they'll build a big nest inside them and lay all their eggs in there. And the amazing thing is they, within a day or two of hatching, the little ones will jump out and flutter down to the ground, and then the females take them off into the undergrowth where they'll raise them and grow up. This bird is in its breeding plumage, right, in its prime. When the season comes to an end, which is starting now, you'll see that these colors start to fade, and the males will molt and become very similar to the females. So they'll still have that colored bill, but they molt out of that. And then in the fall, they start to get these colors back again. And many of the ducks will do this, go through this feather molt, and then put on the big show in the fall when they start to pair up again.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I often get the question through the summer, what happened to all the male mallards and the male wood ducks, for that reason, because they lose their typical feathers.
Right. All right, Michael, you got another one?
We do. I'm hoping the quality of this one is okay.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah.
It's a little bit pixely, but it should be clear enough to make out what it is.
Does it say where the photo was taken, Michael?
It doesn't say specifically where it was taken, though the descriptor of the photo says it's a crane. So that's the best I've got.
It's a sandhill crane, and we have small numbers around here. The sandhill cranes historically were probably much more numerous than they are now. This particular crane, this is one that resides here, and there's small numbers around. Some of them hang out at Rifle Bird Sanctuary. They've laid eggs right on the doorstep down there, and if you go down to the refuge, you'll see them. They're also in other places. I think this might be up near one of the golf courses in Burnaby. That's another spot. There's some in Richmond and some out in the valley itself. I just got a photograph from a friend of one of the migratory flocks up in Kispiox, where they estimated about 2,000 of these down in one of the fields. So if you live in the interior, you'll see these cranes flying overhead. They have a sort of a trumpeting kind of call. They fly with the neck straight out, whereas herons fold the neck back over their shoulders, so you can tell them apart. And the cranes will sometimes occur in big flocks as well, hundreds or thousands. And you see them going over in the spring, usually around April, and then heading back south in the fall. So these are great birds. And there's quite a few different species of cranes around the world, and they're all considered sort of, really, really super birds, because they're just so dramatic.
And apparently that one is from New Westminster, so,
Okay.
so it's a local crane. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably down by the golf course down there.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another one for you right here.
Oh yes. Well, Alex, you could take this one.
It's one of our celebrities here, the red-winged blackbird in the photo here. This is one that I hear waking me up at 3 a.m. sometimes with their like conquery kind of call that you can hear. Or sometimes it's like, even if you're walking near kind of marshy or wetlandy areas, you'll hear them calling for sure. So
Great.
I think that's one of the commonest birds in North America. It's on all the wetlands across.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Huh. We got time for a couple more, I think, Michael.
Sure thing. I've got one more, and then I've got to download a couple that have been just submitted. So here is another one for your viewing pleasure. Here we go.
Oh, there's the mandarin duck. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay, we got three species here. So the mandarin duck is obviously that one in the middle, all the feathers, display feathers. On the right is a female wood duck. And so you can see the white around the eye and brownish, not anywhere as bright as the male, because the females will be sitting on eggs and going into the forest. They want to keep kind of discreet. And then in behind is a coot. And this American coot, it's a rail. You probably heard the expression skinny as a rail.
Mm.
These birds live in the marsh and they're flattened laterally, so they're thin, so they can go through the reeds and things, and that's where the term skinny as a rail came from.
Oh.
That's the coot, and they're very numerous on some of the bigger lakes. This is probably down at Burnaby Lake, I'm guessing, and so you get coots and wood ducks and mandarins all together. That's very nice.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have a chance to look up what the American coot's feet look like, because they've got like a bright blue kind of color and interesting flaps on them. So.
We're almost done. There was one more question here. It was around whether there are online chat forums or online forums around birds to help identify different birds. Like, can you go on and send a note to an expert like you guys? Do those things exist?
They do, but I think the easiest thing is to go to Merlin, which is run by the Cornell Lab for Ornithology. And if you just go to eBird, type in eBird, and then follow the links down, there's a program called Merlin, and you can enter in some of this, the things that you see. Like it asks how big the bird is and some of the markings, and it will help identify them for you. And I have a neighbor who knew virtually no birds at all, went to Mexico with it, and he sent me a text from Mexico and said, "This is incredible. This thing is identifying all these birds for me. It's absolutely phenomenal." So that's probably the best one. And Alex, you may have a couple of others.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you're looking for online ways to like pose questions to experts who can answer them, I think social media is a good place to go. There are a lot of local organizations you could pose those questions to. I get a lot of questions through Stanley Park Ecological Society and through Vancouver Bird Celebration about the birds through Facebook and Instagram, and it's a fun way to help answer those questions and to reach out to people who may know the answer to very specific questions, because sometimes that's the case. So that's a good way. Birds Canada too, posting photos and asking questions through there is an option.
What about the someone just put in the chat the iNaturalist app for identifying birds?
Yeah, iNaturalist is it uses photos and things, and so they do take the birds in them. But eBird is being used better.
Okay.
It works okay.
Yeah.
The other one I was thinking about was the BC Bird Alert, the Rare Bird Alert. So when there's rare birds around, there's a Mel Hertig runs this, and it has she puts on there every few days kind of birds that are around. And you can ask Mel if you've seen birds. She's great at identifying them for you, and we'll find people to help. And the other thing, if you want to really get going on this, one thing that's always good is find a natural history society, and they have local bird trips, and they have them sometimes for beginners and others. And that's a really good way to do it. That's how I learned as a kid. I got involved with a couple of birders, and within 6 months, I was identifying most of the birds, because you just absorb it all from them. It's much quicker than trying to stumble through the bird books and the things online. It just gives you that leg up. So try that. But maybe we should have a birding course down there at the...
Yeah, that's an idea. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, Michael put the eBird website in the chat for people.
Yeah. The other thing too, Alyx, at the Vancouver Bird Week site, the celebration site, was the 15 common birds in Vancouver? You see?
Yeah. Yeah, there's some lists there that you can use to kind of help ID some of the common species that are around.
I should just mention to people, if you get into this, it can be quite obsessive.
To give you an additional reason to be obsessed, I was just shared a link to the bcbirdalert.com. So it's a rare bird search alert blog. So you can go on there and start perusing sightings of your local and non-local birds of all shapes and sizes.
That's great. All right. Well, we're almost, I think, about 8:28, so we're out of time. Thank you so much, Rob and Alyx, for your time, for joining us on this evening. We had most of the people who registered came, and a lot of questions, a lot of pictures, a lot of interest. So as I mentioned, our most popular event ever. So it's because of not just the topic, but the people who were on our panel. So thank you so much for that. I also want to thank Michael, who's been working the chat, and he's been live tweeting, and he also set up the Eventbrite and the Zoom and everything. So thank you for that. Some other colleagues, I know Karen Lee's been our Director of Operation, has been doing the Facebook Live event. So thank you, Karen. And we had a couple of our board members and former board members on this as well. I think Mark Rizzo, our chair, was there, and Margaret Mason, our former chair, and there may have been others as well. So thank you for the participation. We are going to send you a survey. We'll put it in the chat, but we're almost out of time. But we'll send you a survey, and if you have a chance, only 5 minutes. We really want to understand what you liked about this, how you learned about it, so that we can do more like this. We think we've hit on something that's very popular with people, and we would just want to find ways that we can do more of these. I also want to thank people who donated as part of this. It was a free event, but as most people probably know, we're a nonprofit society. We start the year with no money, so we have to raise money for everything that we do, and we appreciate all the donations, particularly in this time of COVID, when a lot of nonprofits are really, really struggling. So thank you so much for that. And we will draw for Rob's book in the next couple of days. So you will get an email as long as you are attending, and we have the attendees list. Then Michael's going to print it off, cut them up, put them in a hat, and we might even do something on Instagram or something like that to show the draw. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, thanks so much for everyone coming. Rob and Alyx, again, thank you. Rob will be in touch. I think we need to do more of these kind of things in the future, and both virtually and back when we can get together. So I hope everyone had a good time, and hope you're staying safe, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future.